All right, so we've been discussing diffusion, and diffusion is a substance crossing from an area of high concentration to low, and this occurs passively just because of molecules hitting each other and beginning to spread out and equilibrate in a given space. Now, we then began to discuss this in the context of the cell, where there's a plasma membrane that separates the internal compartment of the cell from the external compartment of the cell. And what happens when water crosses that membrane that is permeable to some substances and not to others? And that was what we called osmosis. Now, what happens though if a cell finds itself in a solution in which the concentration of solute is different than what it has within its own cell? And so we try and describe this difference as tonicity, because what happens is the solution that it is in will cause the cell to gain or lose weight by this process of osmosis. And there's three kinds of solutions we're going to be discussing. First is isotonic, then hypertonic, then hypotonic. Okay, so what happens then if everything is even, that the solute concentration is equal on both sides of the membrane? And this is what is called an isotonic solution. So this doesn't prevent water from crossing. So having equal solute concentration doesn't prevent water from crossing, but what it does do is that there is no net movement of water across the membrane. So most of the cells in your body are going to be in an isotonic solution, because if the solute concentration is not isotonic, it is going to either gain or lose weight. And that's what we're going to talk about next. And that gain or losing weight, what I mean is that they will gain or lose water. Okay, so let's take a look at what happens in a hypertonic solution. So hyper means more, and what this is referring to is that the outside solute concentration is greater than the internal solute concentration. So remember, the solute can't cross. The solute, it cannot cross the membrane, but water can. And what happens is that water will exit the cell through that plasma membrane, and that causes the cell to be dehydrated or shrivel. In other words, this is going to result in a water loss from the cell. So the opposite of this is when you have a solute concentration outside the cell that is less than what's inside. This is what's called a hypotonic solution. Again, hypo means less, and what it's referring to is the concentration of solute outside the cell. So what happens is that the solute cannot cross, but the water can. So the water crosses into the cell, water itself going from an area of high concentration of water to a lower concentration of water, which is inside the cell. And the water begins to accumulate and eventually can cause the cell to burst, which is also called lysis. So this is what happens in an animal cell. However, in a plant cell, plant cells are rigid, and they have an added cell wall, this carbohydrate layer that's on the outside of their cell membrane. And so they can actually take an influx of water, and it allows the cell to be turgid, that is stiff with the water. And this is actually an appropriate amount of water for a plant, so that stems, soft stems, etc., they can actually withstand gravity and won't wilt.